As Matthew said, welcome everyone to our session today on transitioning from Excel into Microsoft Lists. Um, Microsoft Lists is I feel like it's kind of one of these applications that people might hear about, but don't really understand the true benefits of actually using it. So today I really wanted to start by setting the why before we really dive into the how do we do things with Microsoft Lists. So I know a lot of people start with Excel because it's comfortable. We're familiar with it. We've been using it for a long time. But as soon as multiple people need to update the same data, the spreadsheet starts to show its limitations. That's where SharePoint lists really shine. So first off, real-time collaboration. Multiple people can work in the same list at the same time without overriding each other or emailing versions back and forth. Sorry, I'm still battling with my cold here. And secondly, permission controls. Yes, we have permissions in Excel, but not like with lists. We can control who can view, edit, manage data, really right down to an individual item, rather than just do the entire file or a sheet like we do in Excel. And third, the integration. Lists really is directly plugged into applications like Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, Power Automate, your different Power apps. And that opens the door to having these default workflows and approvals and different notifications that we can actually be using. We also get data validation. Yes, I know that Excel does have some data validation, meaning we can enforce things like drop downs, required fields. We don't do required fields and data types in Excel quite like we do in Microsoft Lists, which of course you'll definitely see that today. And finally, views and filters. Really let different people look at the same information differently without duplicating. So views and filters are a great option. Do Excel workbooks have views? Yes, but not like we have here in Microsoft Lists. Very, very different. So when it comes to Microsoft Lists, they're designed for structured tracking. Things like doing task lists, issues, assets, requests or inventory, those kind of things, they're not meant to replace Excel. It's really meant to handle information that needs consistency and shared ownership. So one of the big advantages really is templates. I use templates all the time, and you'll see an example of templates here today. But instead of starting from scratch, we can actually use a pre-built layout like an asset manager or issue tracker, and then we can actually customize the list from there. So lists also support multiple views. They have built-in grid, gallery, calendar. So the same data can be viewed differently depending on your scenario, what really works best for your information and what you need to see at any given time. And integration is really key here. Lists connect directly to Teams, to SharePoint, to Power Automate, which means our data lives where work is already happening. And the customization is much easier than Excel. There's no complex formulas that we need to do to control how the data behaves or anything like that. It's just night and day difference, really, to be honest. But let's balance that by talking about Excel. So Excel is still the right tool when you need complex calculations. You want to do things like financial modeling, you want to create pivot tables or do that deep data analysis, those types of things, 100% you're going to use Excel. It's incredibly flexible because of the formulas, the charts, the dashboards, the macros, which can really do just about anything, and now with Python and of course Copilot. Excel also works well when you need offline access or advanced formatting that's presentation ready. You need to share it with others. Where Excel starts to struggle, though, is when many people are entering data at the same time and when you need strong governance around the permissions and that validation. That's why there isn't really an either or conversation. It's really about choosing the right tool for the job. So we're not saying take everything from Excel and bring it over to Microsoft Lists. They each have their place. So if we pull these differences together, lists are generally easy to set up for tracking and collaborating, while Excel requires more expertise on when things get a little more advanced. So customization in lists focuses on structure. We have columns, we have views, we have rules, whereas Excel customization really relies heavily on formulas, macros, tables, pivot tables, those kind of things. Collaboration, that's another big difference. Lists are built for real-time, multi-user updates right inside Microsoft 365. Excel can be shared, but it isn't designed first and foremost as a collaborative database. So the takeaways here are that Excel analyzes data, lists manage data. So it has a lot of similarities to an actual database. We only create the columns of what we want to see. Similar to a database, we create tables to store that data. Lists are very much like that. So top benefits for SharePoint lists. Here we'll really start to break down the benefits a little bit more in detail. So we have that real-time collaboration that we mentioned. We're going to have those custom views and filters. We're also going to have data validation and integrity. So this is where lists really help clean up messy spreadsheets. And next, the permissions and the security. With lists, you can control access to the list level, item level, and even by view. Far more control than a shared spreadsheet. Now, some of this might be a little bit beyond our topic of discussion today. They might be a little bit more advanced features. Of course, you can always reach out to Smart Dolphins and we could help you with advanced features, or maybe we'll do another session and do more of those advanced features. Today, we really want you to be comfortable with, here's the differences between how I'm going to do things in Excel and what a list is and how a list can be created and or how can I bring a spreadsheet into a list. Because once you start with that spreadsheet, it's something you're very familiar with and how things work, but as soon as you start to feel like it's just not giving you exactly what you need, you try and create a workflow and it's difficult to do, that's where a list is going to come into play. So like I said, we're not saying take all your Excel spreadsheets and dump them into a list, but there definitely will be cases where you may want to do that. So there's another automation with Power Automate that can be used in lists as well, where it can actually trigger emails. It can trigger approvals to happen, reminders, or workflows that can automatically update data changes. It's built into a Microsoft list. So if you've attended any of our document management sessions that we've had in the past and things like that, you're going to find that there's a lot of similarities between Microsoft lists and document libraries. They have a lot of the same similarities when it comes to the tools across the ribbon and where and how we access things. So finally, that integration with Microsoft 365. Lists work seamlessly in Teams. They work with Outlook, Excel, Power Automate, Power BI, making them really a connected part of workflows, really much different than a standalone file. It is more integrated than Excel is. Excel sometimes can be seen as more of on its own, although it does have that connectivity through Copilot and other aspects, it really can be seen as kind of a separate application. So these last benefits really focus on scale and usability. So lists are mobile friendly and accessible, which is great if you have remote or field-based team members that need to access that information. They include version history and audit trails, so you can see what changed, who changed it, and when they changed it. There's also built-in custom formatting. So if you want to highlight statuses or priorities without changing the actual underlying data, you can do that with lists. So some similarities there with Excel. And finally, the scalability and the structure. Lists handle structured data better than Excel, and it stays organized as they grow. Okay. Now, of course, we're going to be seeing some examples of all of this, but I wanted to kind of put together a table to really summarize these differences that we have. And so lists offer this seamless collaboration, the built-in views, stronger permissions, and easier automation. Much easier, believe me. Excel still excels, no pun intended, at advanced calculations and data analysis. I'm never going to leave Excel because I absolutely love it, and I love pivot tables and charts and all of those kind of things. But what's important here is that lists are not files. They're SharePoint list objects, which gives them the governance, the security, and the structure that really kind of the spreadsheet, the Excel, simply doesn't have. Okay, so little side by side here, going deeper on the practical everyday differences. You have all of this information in your handout. So be sure to download that handout that Matthew mentioned in the chat there, so that you can really kind of be going through this on your own, so that you can have this as reference material when you go back and you start thinking about, should I be using Microsoft Lists? Should I stay with Excel? That kind of thing. So we don't stop sharing. We really want to have a tool that, yes, can be shared with others, which is why we use document libraries and we put our Excel spreadsheets out there. But I get the question all the time about, if two of us try and go on the same cell, whose information is going to be saved? We don't get that in lists. We don't have a cell technically that they're going to. You'll see some differences there. Could someone go to the same record and try and update it? Absolutely. They could, like Excel, but it doesn't work that way. It works a lot differently on how things are done. So the governance and the reliability, those are great features that we have in Microsoft Lists as well. So when should you use each of these? This is an important thing to think about. So use Excel when you need calculations, pivot tables, charts, modeling, offline access, but then use Microsoft Lists when you need something more structured, tracking, shared data entry, automation, real-time collaboration. So the goal isn't to replace Excel, it's to stop forcing Excel to do jobs it really wasn't designed to do. Okay, so where Microsoft Lists can actually be used. We can use Microsoft Lists directly within Microsoft apps. So if I go to my Microsoft account online, log in, I can see all of my apps. I go to the apps launcher, I can see every app that I have. I can simply open Lists directly from there. So this is what my list is going to look like, and I'll walk you through a little bit on this and how to import Excel and how to create a new list. But you can also be using Microsoft Teams. So if I go to Microsoft Teams, I can have a list inside a channel as a tab. So right now I happen to be in Microsoft Teams. I'm in my accounting department team, I'm in my accounts payable team, and up at the top I have this tab called Issue Tracker. If I click on that, this is a Microsoft list. So it is residing within the SharePoint site of that team. So just so you know, it can be accessed that way. But let me jump back to talking about another way to access it. If you go to a SharePoint site, you can have a list added, just like you add a document library. A list can be added to a SharePoint site. On the left-hand side of this particular SharePoint site, I have this policy list. If I click policy list, it opens up an actual list. You can see it's got all these columns, looking like a spreadsheet, but it doesn't have over 16,000 columns going across. And it doesn't show over 1 million rows going down with the column letters and the row numbers like you see in Excel. Very, very different when it comes to that. And like I said, if you look at the menu going across the top of this list, very similar to a document library. Okay, very similar to a document library. Now, we'll get into what all of this is as we kind of go through things, but just so you know, this is a question that I get asked a lot, is what kind of lists do people create? So here's just a few examples of some lists that people create. You could have an asset manager where it's tracking equipment information or inventory. You could have project management. You could have safety and compliance where you want to keep track of incident reporting or training records. You could have inventory management, which is very common. Environmental monitoring where you have emissions tracking. You have waste management. You could have shift scheduling, task assignments, supply tracking, purchase orders. There's a lot of different options when it comes to the types of lists that you would be creating. So when a list gets created, it's important to kind of understand, well, where does it reside? Where does a list go? So Microsoft lists are always saved to SharePoint, but the exact location depends on where and how the list is created. So default save locations, if you go to the app, so if I just go to the Microsoft app, create a new one, it actually is saving it to your personal SharePoint site. It's really that same site that powers OneDrive for Business. You won't actually see it as a file like in My Files. It exists under the site contents in lists. So think of it as a private SharePoint list, even though it feels like OneDrive. But if you create a list inside Microsoft Teams, it's saved directly to the SharePoint site that is connected to that team, because of course it has that background. So lists created in Teams get saved to the Teams SharePoint site. So important things to remember, lists are not saved as a file. They're not like an Excel workbook or a Word document kind of a thing. They're SharePoint objects. They're called a SharePoint list object. Permissions, retention, and backup is all inherited from SharePoint. So attachments are stored in lists. They're also stored, well, I should say attachments that are stored in a list, because we could have a column that is an attached file. That's also stored in the SharePoint site. So lists are stored in SharePoint, either your personal SharePoint site called My Lists or a team SharePoint site when it's created and saved within the team. Okay. Just want to make sure everybody had that understanding. Okay. Now let's look at a list. So I had mentioned I had this list here called policies. And what's the benefit of having this? Well, what if I'm responsible for the list of policies and I have coworkers in my department that we all work together on these policies? We could have a date that it needs to be reviewed by. We can have a status. We could have the subject of what it is. We could have a title, the person that is responsible for that specific policy, the policy itself. That can actually be an email address of a specific person in your network. You can add additional columns. You can see right here that it says add column. So lists are created by adding columns. And we don't just say, I just want a new column like we do in Excel, and it's generic. We say, I want to add a new column, and we choose the data type of that column. So that's where the database similarities come into play. We choose, do you want it to be text? Do you want to have multiple choice? Do you want date and time? Do you want multiple lines of text? So more like a notes. Do you want it to be a person where you're going to put in their email address? Do you want it to be a number, a yes, no, a location, currency, image, lookup, etc.? There's all kinds of different column types. So first, you're going to choose the column type that you want. Then you click next and fulfill the rest of the examples. I'll show you when I actually create a list how more of that works. But just to show you, kind of what are you going to be able to do with these lists, up at the top right. Okay, let me start at the left-hand side, sorry. You're going to see the name of the list that you're in, and notice there's a star, so you can add it to your favorites list if it's something that you use regularly. You have your standard menu going across the top, but on the right-hand side is the menu related to this specific list. So you're going to have filter options, you're going to have grouping options. Not as easy to do in Excel, although you can. It's kind of difficult, but you also will have sorting capabilities. And then you're going to be able to add and create all these different views. So this particular list has a calendar view. So if I click calendar, it's going to show the records of information based on their date within the calendar. I also have a new view, which I didn't really do much with that. I just clicked add view and didn't give it a name or filter it or anything, but I'll show you some examples of how you could do that. So kind of be looking at how this works versus how your Excel spreadsheet works. So if I go to an Excel spreadsheet, so here's an Excel spreadsheet that is my asset tracker. I could go out and, keep plugging in, adding in new records of information. I could do some sorting, some filtering, all of that kind of information. But I'm not doing formulas on this data. I'm really storing the data. We're looking up specific information and we're adding new records. That's what this is meant for. And that to me tells me right away that I should be using lists. Because what if I have an assigned to, or I have a last maintenance date and I need to know when the next maintenance date due is. I need to be notified 15 days before that date. Is that easy to set up here in Excel? No, it is not. Definitely not. But in a list, it's nothing. It's super easy to do. So in a minute, I'm going to do a demonstration of how to create a blank one. Just a super quick overview, just so everybody knows how to do that. I want to show you an example of a template, and I'm going to take this Excel spreadsheet and I'm going to import it into a list. Then I'm going to walk you through, this is how you could create a view, here's how you could create an automated workflow, so that you can get a better idea as to what can I do with this when we are done putting it into Microsoft Lists. So I'm going to, now, by the way, just so you know this, I have this asset tracker in a table. So lists use tables. So if you're going to have an Excel spreadsheet that you're going to import into a list, by the way, it doesn't take it out of Excel. So if you just want to test it to see, that's what I did. I did a bunch of testing to say, well, do I like it in a list or should I keep it in Excel? You can always put it in a list and try it. If you don't like it, get rid of it. You don't have to keep it. And it keeps everything that you had in Excel. But I'm going to tell you, you're probably going to want to keep it in lists, depending on your data. So this is a table. And I'm going to close it because when you go to import it, it doesn't like it to be opened because, of course, there could be data that's being changed while it's open. So I'm going to go ahead and close it. I don't need it open anymore. So what I want to do now is I want to show you a couple of examples of how can you create a list, starting with doing a list within the List app. So if you go to the List app, you're going to see a recent list of all of my lists where I have event and workshop, curriculum changes, I have billboards, that's part of my marketing department. I have asset manager, employee onboarding. I'm sorry, Matthew, can we get to your question here quick? Sorry.
Yeah, no, not at all. Yeah, someone is wondering, is when creating a list in a SharePoint site, are you going to talk about creating a list form versus just creating a list?
I'm really just talking about lists today. But I'll
Okay, so we're not
mention the
going to cover
forms
this.
and everything. Yep, I'll mention what those are, and I can show a quick example of what you get when you go into them. Because
Okay,
forms
perfect.
is a
Thank you.
whole nother, we could do one session just on doing forms.
All right.
because there's a
So,
lot to it.
all right. So not going to be fully covered in today's session.
Absolutely not. We don't have enough time,
All
unfortunately.
right.
Wish we did,
Totally
but
fair.
okay. So anyway, when you come in, if you would save something as a favorite by doing that star, they're going to appear at the top. The other ones are going to be the recent ones. So recently, I was in a list called Asset Manager. I about an hour ago, I was in my clinic policy. Well, that's actually part of a SharePoint site, but it's showing up here because it's my recent list. Now, when we talk about having a list in SharePoint, whoever has rights to that SharePoint site has rights to that list by default, unless that is changed. Now, once again, that's a very advanced feature, not part of our session here today, where we can put in permissions. But just so you're aware of how this works. So this policy is coming from this clinic SharePoint site. I opened it recently. It shows up in my recent list because I'm a part of it, but so could 20 other people. So whoever has access to that SharePoint site by default has access to the list. And if they open it, it's going to show up in their recent list as well. If I go to the tab at the top next to recent where it says my lists, these are the lists that I have created here in this app that are not part of SharePoint sites or a team site. These are, I have an executive report, I have onboarding, I have a curriculum change, I have a few others here. I have speakers, I have recruitment tracker. I have all these different lists that I have access to that I personally created right here. Can I share something? Like if I created in SharePoint slash Teams, it's automatically shared with everybody that has rights to that team or rights to that SharePoint site. But here it's different. So if I create a list here, I can share it. It's like me creating a file in OneDrive and then sharing it with other people. Kind of think of it that way. So first, think about, is it something you're going to maintain in my lists? Or is this something that you want available through Microsoft Teams or a SharePoint site? If you want it in Teams, create it in Teams. If you want it in SharePoint, create it in SharePoint. Okay, just so you're aware. But just so you could see, at the top, I could say create new. Now, up at the top, I can choose, do I want to create a new list, a form, a gallery, a calendar, or a board? Now, gallery, calendar, and board are different views that we have available. Form is really for collecting results, so we can publish a form and then people can fill it out, and then the form records automatically go into a list. I can do that with a Microsoft form too. I can have my form entries automatically going into a Microsoft list. So we can create that directly from here. And for that person that asked that question, just so you know, when you come in to create this, you basically are going to give it a name. It automatically is saving it in your list. But if you want it to be saved someplace else, like I want it in my accounting department, my intranet, my marketing department team, whatever, you can choose a different location. But my list is only available to me, just so you're aware. Now, I'm not going to walk through that because this is a lot more complicated than what we're kind of talking about here today. Whole nother session for, I love forms, so I'd love to do a session on the whole thing. But if I go and I want to create something new and I decide that I want it to be gallery, you're going to basically get the same look and feel. And I do have, let me kind of show you this. Back to PowerPoint here real quick. Oh, I thought I had a slide on that. I just have the views, I guess. Sorry about that. I thought I had a little bit more on that. But just so you know, the forms are really related to somebody filling things out. The gallery is for visual, for image-based. Calendar is for date-driven items. And the board view is a card style. So you know how in Microsoft Planner and things we can have card style. Also in the old Outlook contacts, we can have card style. That's what board view is. Otherwise, list is like columns and rows of information, just so you have a little bit of a better understanding as to what that all is. So anyway, I'm really just going to show you very quickly how to create a new list. So if I want to create a new list, I'm going to choose list, and then I give the list a name. I can choose where I want this list to be saved at. And let's say that um, I want to do a business tracker. I'm going to click create. It's automatically saving it in my list. Then I basically am going to go out and I'm going to tell it which of the fields do I want to actually add in. So what do I want for columns of information? So you can see right now it automatically brings in this title, and then I can go to add column because it's completely empty. I go to add column to choose what I want to add in. I'm going to keep it on text and I'm going to click next. And on the right hand side is where I fill out the details of what's going to go in each one, what's going to go in each column. So this one's going to first be an asset ID. I could give it a description. I could change the type or give it a default value, and I've got some other options. I'm going to click save for right now. I want to add another column. So first I'm going to build it. And if I want to have the asset name come next, I'm going to do text. I'm going to call it asset name. And by the way, the names of each column has to be unique. I'm going to click save. I go back and I can add another column. Maybe this time I want it to be do I want to do multiple choice? Um, Maybe I want multi-choice. I'll do choice. I'll click next just so you could see. Maybe I'm going to have asset type. And then I could choose what do I want for my asset type. So if I want it to be accounting, and I'm just going to type in some dummy information here real quick just so you can see how this works. Accounting is going to be marketing asset, it's going to be an IT asset, etc. I could add in multiple choices so that we're creating that drop down list. I'm going to click save just so you could see if I go to this asset type, until I start entering records of information in there, you're not going to see that it's really a drop down list. First, you're going to build it by putting in all of your columns. Now, I'll just show you one more quick example. I'll do a date just so you could see. And let's say that this is going to be their warranty date or something like that. Warranty. Oops, I didn't spell warranty right. Warranty date. Not that you can't add fields later on, you most certainly can, but it's best if you could try and choose the fields right away so that as data is being entered, it automatically is being entered correctly. So anyway, just so you could see, I would come in and I could keep adding in all these different fields of information. Now, of course, we can always go back and make changes to these at any time, but how do you add an item in? If you go to the top left, you could click add new item. That easy. Then you just gives you, this is like filling out a form. It gives you the fields that you had typed in. So the title, you could enter in the asset value, the asset name, and then for the asset type is going to give you your drop down list. Now we can change the colors on these just so you know. I'm just going to enter a couple of pieces of information just to show you. So the title is, this is asset marketing, and then this is going to be an asset ID of B2345, and then the asset name is going to be building. You know, I would enter in all my data and click save. So I could always come back, like I said, and be adding all this information in. So that's a very brief example of how that list can be created. But if I already have a list that's been created in Excel and I want to bring it into Microsoft Lists, let's walk through that. Then I'm going to show you what can you do with that. So that Excel spreadsheet that I showed you a minute ago is the one I'm going to use. So up at the top left, I'm going to go back and click on lists. You're going to see that my business tracker created 3 minutes ago is here. If I want that to be part of my favorites at the top, I can click its nice little star. If I want to have a list in Excel, if I want to have a list in Teams, just so you're familiar with how this would work, at any channel that you go to, if you want to add a new list, go to your tabs at the top, click the plus sign, go into apps, choose list. So if you don't see it, of course, you could go to see all, but once you click list, give your list a name, and choose if you want to post it or not. Oh, let me just save it first here. Then you can give your list a name and start adding in your fields, doing that kind of a thing, depending on, of course, what it is that you want. So if I want to create a new one, do I want it to be based on a template? Do I want it to be based on a blank list? Always look through these templates. Microsoft does change these and adds new ones in, kind of a thing. So if you need an issue tracker, an event itinerary, travel request, whatever type of list, there's all these different types of lists that you could start with so that it's automatically created for you. Absolutely love templates. So just to show you an example, if I say work tracker, it's going to show me a preview, and I could click at the bottom once it shows it. I could click at the bottom and say use template. This particular, just so you can see, I'm going to keep it as work tracker. I'm going to click save that I want to save this. But basically, just so you're remembering that this is now a part of the SharePoint site that is a part of this team, just so you're aware of how all that flows back together again, okay? But I'm going to create a new list, but I'm going to do it based on an Excel spreadsheet. Now, if I want that to be in my SharePoint site, I could go directly to the SharePoint site. Just so you can see, if I'm on the Home tab of my SharePoint site, I can go to the New menu, I could choose List, and then I get the same exact options. So why don't I go ahead and do the Excel right from here? So you can see I could choose Import From, I could do a CSV file, I could use an existing list or Excel. I'm going to choose Excel. Okay, so I'll walk you through how this all pulls together here. So I could either choose a file from down below, or I could choose to upload from my device. So I'm not, depending on where it's stored at, cloud-based wise. I'm going to go to my Smart Dolphins folder. I'm going to go to my lists, and I want to bring in this asset equipment tracker. That was the name of that workbook that I showed you earlier. And it's going to load the tables. So once again, it's looking for tables. Now, I didn't name the table. To be honest, usually I would. So I turned the worksheet into a table, but I didn't give the table a name. If I had multiple tables, I could click on the drop down and choose the name of the table that I want to bring in, but I just have the one. I'm going to be on that. I'm going to click next. Then I could change the name if I wanted to. I'll keep the name. I'm going to click create. So it's going to automatically take that information that was in that Excel spreadsheet and now import it into an Excel or into a Microsoft list. So now we're going to have all that list capability. So you can see the asset ID, the asset name, the asset type. It's got all of the same columns that came over from Excel. So you can see I've got last maintenance, next maintenance, warranty. I've got notes. If I needed to add another column, you most certainly can. You can add another column at any time. You can manage your columns, which I have some additional information in your handouts about this, but you could manage a column by going to the column heading. So if I go to asset names, I could sort A to Z, Z to A. I could filter by, I could group by asset name. I could go into my column settings where I could format the column. I could make it bigger, wider, move it, hide it, whatever it is I need to do with it. I also could create a total. Because this is text, I only get count where it's going to do it's like an Access database where it could do a formula at the end of the list where it would count the number of records. So you could see I have a total of 50 records because I chose count. If you're on a number field or a date field, if I go to this last maintenance, I'm getting a little bit different because it understands that this is dates. So I get a count option again because it's doesn't, no other options for counting, but I could see how many records I have within that list. That's really what that is doing. But if I had a number field, it could be doing a running total of that field, of that data that's entered in that column. But if you notice at the top right, I have this add view. If I want to create a view, I can click Add View. I can then choose the type of view that I want. So if I want to be able to look at, warranty information and I want it to be on a calendar view, I could create a calendar. So let me show you that. If I go to calendar, it says, what date do you want it to start on? I'm going to say the created date. It could end on the modified date. It kind of depends on the default views and everything that I want. I'm going to make it public, which means that this view will be available to all users. And who are the users? Everybody that has rights to this SharePoint site right now has rights to this list because that's where I created it. Down at the bottom, I have more options where I can give this a title based on different items. So do I want the next maintenance due to be the title? Do I want subheadings to it? So I'm going to put in last maintenance date as a subheading, just so you could see we have these different options of what it is that you can choose from. But up at the top, I'm going to give this a name. So I'm going to call this warranty. Oops, I have to spell that correctly. I'm going to name this warranty. Make sure you, and by the way, you can always go back and modify your view. I'm going to just click create right now, and it automatically is giving me that view. Now, this is not the perfect example, but I could modify this by filtering it. So do I only want to see specific information on the calendar that is coming up? Do I want to know based on the last maintenance date of just being this specific date? Do I want to see these dates? I can have it show all dates and I could choose which dates I want to see. There's a lot of different ways to filter, sort your list, those kind of things as well. So just so you know, you have all that capability. So I can always go back and navigate my different views depending on how I want things to work. But every time you add a new view, it gives you the new tab up at the top, which by the way, I love templates. I mentioned that. But if you use a template, one of the Microsoft templates or company template, because technically you could have company templates as well, and then you could just reuse them. But just so you're aware, when you do that, a lot of those are actually going to come with built-in views. Okay. Now, of course, if I wanted to add another view, I could go in and I could give the view a name, and maybe I want to call it by person, responsible, whatever. I'll just say by person. If I want it to be list, I could click create and it automatically gives me that, but I could go and filter and I could modify the view to be saved with a specific filter and things like that as well. So it's totally up to you how you want to actually be working with your different views. Now, there's a little bit more information in your handouts on that because we're going to run out of time here real quick. I won't go into more detail on that today, but just so you're aware of the fact that you have this ability of having all these different views. If I want to go back to seeing all of my items again, I can click on the tab for the view called All Items. That is your default that you get. But let's take a look at what you have across the top of the ribbon. So up at the top, you could edit multiple records at one time in this Edit in Grid view. So if you added a new column and you wanted to be able to update information in multiple rows, multiple records of information at one time, you could actually do that. You could select the records, make your changes, and then save it. Save the changes. So you can always edit in grid view if that suits your needs. Otherwise, just so you're aware, I could go to share because if I wanted to share this with somebody else that isn't a part of this clinic SharePoint site, isn't a part of the Teams site that I'm on, I could click share and it's the same sharing capabilities that you get in all of your other Microsoft apps. So it's consistent across the board, which is great because why have to, relearn something? You could export the data. So if you want to export it to a CSV because you want to upload it into another software program, whatever your case might be, you could do that. Also, there's a forms icon that you can click. So if you want to create a new form from this, you can. But what I want to really talk about right now is the ability for doing some automation. Just like with a Microsoft document library in SharePoint, we have similar, almost identical, automation features available. So first off, you could go to flows. Flows is going to give you the ability of being able to create a flow and have them accessible through the flows window. I don't have any in here right now, but I am going to create a rule because I want you to see how that rule works. When you go to rules, you could click create a rule. Just like with a Microsoft, excuse me, just like with a Microsoft document library, a SharePoint document library, you get the same rule options as of today. I don't know if you know this, but there's some changes that have already happened in SharePoint document libraries, and there's a lot more coming to SharePoint in general in July. But anyway, you could go into if an item is modified or a new item is created, an item is deleted, or a date is approaching, you could choose one of these to create an automation. If I go into date approaching, add a date time column is entered. Well, what in the world does that mean? That actually means that it did not recognize a date in my list. So in Excel, there were dates, but when I imported that data, it wasn't seen as actually a date column. So it wouldn't even let me use this rule because it says I don't have a date column. So let me jump back here for just a second. So I'm going to go to this next maintenance, and I'm going to go into column settings, and I'm going to click edit. I'm going to column settings, and I'm clicking edit. It is on text. It's a single line of text. Now, I don't know if you're a database person or not, but if you import a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet into a database, you can actually make sure that the data type comes in as well. That's not happening here by default, just so you're noticing. But if I want this to be a date and time, I want to use a friendly format for it, I want to have a default value or whatever, I'll click save. And notice what it's telling me. Changing this type of this column may result in a loss of data. Are you sure you want to change this? I'm going to say save. So some of these dates may have come over correctly. Some of these may not have. If I go to the, oops, sorry, I meant to just double click. If I double click on that, I can edit all, and I can come in and I can see that as I look at all these different current fields, because I double clicked on the record to edit the whole contents of the record, I could go to any one of these fields and make changes to it. When I come down to this next maintenance due, which is the one that I changed to a date, it looks different than last maintenance date and warranty expiration. It gives you a date drop down. So it saw October 20th of 2026. So it did convert them all to being a regular date. Now, of course, I would go back and do that with all of my date fields. So sometimes you need to go back. Like if I want the status to be a drop-down list, you could go back and change that to being a drop-down list. It's not going to come over and automatically recognize that I want this to be a multi-choice. I want this to be a choice field. I want this to be a multi-column or a multi-line field, those kind of things. It doesn't know to do that. So you do have to maintain those columns when you bring things over, just so you're aware. But now I'm actually going to go back and I'm going to go to automate. I'm going to go to rules. I'm going to click create a rule. And from here, I'm going to say a date approaches. I didn't get that same message that I got before because I do have a date column. So it's going to say, it's going to ask me to fill in the blank. So it's like a little wizard. So it wants to know the number of days before. So if I want to be notified 14 days before, I could type in 14. So 14 days before, the next maintenance date is the only date field it's recognizing. So under choose a column, that's the column I can choose from. So I can get an email notification. That's what this one does by default. If I wanted to email me, post it to a Teams channel and do some other things, I could set up a workflow to do that. But this does not do all of that workflow. This is all we get, which is great. That's usually all I need. So it's going to give me a 14 days before the next maintenance due. It will send an email to whoever I tell it to, or who created, who modified, or to myself. Now, I could say that I want it to be based on a specific field, but it doesn't understand people fields right now because I don't have a people field, so to say. I'll come back to that in just a second. I do want it to go to me. So I'm going to say to me. Then I click create, and that's what's going to happen is 14 days before that next maintenance date, it's going to automatically email me and I will have a link to go directly to that record. That's fantastic that we have that capability. So you can have all these different rules set up that if this happens, do this. If this happens, do this. If this information changes, do this. So we have all that capability. We don't get this that easy of automation back in Excel. That's where a list really shines. Now, if I just to for clarification purposes, if I go back to this assigned to, I'm going to go to column settings and click edit. So right now it is only a single line of text. Just so you can see, because I had all those other people's names and they're not part of my domain, but if I wanted to, I can't change this to actually be a person. I can change it to be a choice, a number, a currency, or a date and time. I can't modify that to be a person. Because what if I have a person that needs to be notified or the person that's responsible for this asset item? I'm going to click cancel, and that's when I might need to add a new column. So at the bottom, or at the right hand side of this, I might want to add in a new column and have it be person, a type called person. I'm going to click next. And then I'm going to give it a name and I'm going to say person responsible. I could, oops, sorry. Let me fix my typo here. I could put in a description, etc. If I want to show their profile picture, I can do that as well because there'll be people from my domain, that kind of a thing anyway. So I'm going to say yes, I want to. And I could say allow selection of groups on there too. I'll do that just for now. I'm going to click save. But anyway, what's going to happen then is in that column for person assigned, so if I go into this first asset and I want to add that person in, which by the way, I can rearrange my columns from that menu for each column, I can move them. But just so you could see person responsible, if I go into enter a name or an email address, I'm going to start typing my name. It's going to automatically have my name entered. So that has benefits that we do not get in Excel because we can use that to say, okay, I want to email the person that's under that person responsible. It triggers other workflow capabilities as well. And it can be used to notify that person in so many other ways. But I'm going to keep it as that. I'm going to go ahead and close that. It automatically saves it because it's cloud-based. And you can see the profile circle is coming based on my account information in that person responsible. So when we talk about working in Excel, you're definitely going to continue to work in Excel. But I got to tell you, there's definitely opportunities for moving your information into Microsoft Lists. So for a quick recap on what we were just mentioning, we explored key reasons for moving to Excel or from Excel to a SharePoint list, like real-time collaboration, granular permission levels, that seamless integration across your 365 applications, those making the transition, highlighting the strengths of both Excel and Microsoft Lists. Because Excel is this wonderful program, but Microsoft Lists can make your data more collaborative, secure, actionable, where Excel really remains that powerful tool for data analysis. So I encourage you to experiment with creating a list from one of your spreadsheets. Give it a try. Use some of the automation features, really kind of check things out. Do the views. Absolutely love the views. So I hope you have found this information helpful and that you can make a decision a little bit better on the right tool for your needs. Okay. So at this point, I'm going to hand things back over to Matt.